It was a Friday, payday. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot at lunch, refreshing my banking app like it owed me something. The direct deposit had hit at exactly 9:04 a.m., and by 9:07, I had already mentally spent most of it. Rent, car insurance, that credit card I told myself I'd pay off when I had more money. And by noon on payday, I was already calculating how long I had to survive until the next one. And here's what hit me that afternoon. Just sitting there in a hot parking lot eating a sad sandwich. I had just gotten a raise 3 months earlier. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life, and I felt broker than ever. But this isn't really about budgeting. It isn't about lattes or avocado toast or any of that stuff. It's actually about something much weirder. About a trap that's been engineered partly by the economy and partly by your own brain to keep you exactly where you are. And there are three psychological patterns behind it. The third one is the one that completely changed how I think about money and why I was spinning my wheels for years without realizing it. So let's talk about it. Here's the thing that nobody tells you when you get a raise or a promotion or a better job. Your brain doesn't celebrate, it recalibrates. There's a concept in psychology called hedonic adaptation, the idea that humans return to a relatively stable level of happiness regardless of major positive or negative events. You get the raise, you feel good for a few weeks, then that new salary becomes the baseline. And suddenly you need more just to feel okay again. This is the first trap. And it's invisible because it doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like ambition. Think about it this way. You're making $50,000 a year, and you think, if I could just get to 70K, I'd feel secure. You get there, for maybe 2 months, it feels like breathing room. And then, almost without noticing, your life expands to fill that space. A nicer apartment, a car payment you could technically afford, dinners out a couple times a week instead of one. And you're right back to that same tightness, that same low hum of financial anxiety, just with bigger numbers. And here's what surprised me when I first learned this. Studies show that 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 78%. And what's wild is that number barely changes across income levels. People making $100,000 a year, $150,000, even more, they're caught in the same cycle. So if you've ever thought, I just need to make more money and everything will be fine, your brain is actually lying to you. And it's not your fault. Your brain was designed to want more. That's literally how we survived as a species. But the system knows this, and it's built around it. Which brings me to the second trap, and this one's sneakier. You know how casinos don't have windows or clocks? That's not a coincidence. It's a design decision rooted in a very specific psychological goal. Eliminate your sense of time and consequence so you keep playing. Retailers do the exact same thing. Buy now, pay later. 0% interest for 12 months. These aren't conveniences, they're distance creators. Tools specifically designed to separate the moment of pleasure from the moment of pain, because your brain makes very different decisions depending on how close to consequence feels. There's a name for this in behavioral economics: present bias. Your brain has basically two modes, right now and someday. And right now always wins. It's why you can understand intellectually that putting $200 a month into savings is smart. But when you're standing in a store and there's something you want and the money is technically in your account, future you feels like a stranger, and you don't sacrifice for strangers. I used to think people who couldn't save were just undisciplined. Then I realized I was one of them. I had a savings account. I just kept raiding it because every time I told myself I'd save what was left over at the end of the month, there was never anything left. The month just absorbed it. Now here's the midpoint thing that really got me. Think about how differently the wealthy and the not wealthy use money as a tool versus a reward. Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought in Omaha in 1958 for $31,500, a man worth over $100 billion. He drives himself to McDonald's for breakfast sometimes. And I know that sounds like a quirky billionaire story, but it's actually illustrating something serious. He never let his income become his identity. He never needed the signal of wealth, just the function of it. Meanwhile, studies show the average American with a household income over $75,000 still saves less than 5% of their income. The spending just scales up invisibly. The trap isn't just psychological, it's social. And that's the third pattern, and I think this is the most insidious one, and the one nobody talks about honestly. We spend money to communicate. Not consciously, but every purchase you make is also a message about who you are, where you belong, what kind of person you want to be seen as. The car, the neighborhood, the clothes, the phone you're holding right now. Even the coffee you get in the morning instead of making it at home, that's partly about taste, sure, but it's also about identity. I'm the kind of person who gets good coffee. There's a reason companies like Apple have cult-level loyalty. They figured out decades ago that you're not really selling a product, you're selling membership, a sense of belonging to a group of people who get it. And once you've bought into that identity, spending money to maintain it doesn't feel like spending. It feels like being yourself. This is the exact same psychological mechanism that makes a recent college grad with $40,000 in student debt finance a car that costs $35,000. Not because they're stupid, but because their brain has been quietly told 10,000 times through advertising and culture and peer comparison that this car is what success at this stage of life looks like. And the primal drive to belong, to not be left behind, to signal I'm doing okay, it overrides spreadsheets every single time. Here's a stat that made me stop and sit with this for a while. The average American household carries over $6,000 in credit card debt. But more revealing than the number is this. Most of that debt isn't from emergencies. It's from regular life. Groceries, going out, the small daily decisions that feel completely normal and reasonable in isolation, but compound into a quiet financial crisis. It's not one big mistake, it's 1,000 tiny ones made under the influence of a system optimized to extract money from you. So, okay, if this is all baked into us, the hedonic treadmill, the present bias, the social signaling, what do we actually do about it? Here's what I've learned, and I want to be careful not to make this sound too neat because it's not. The first shift isn't a behavior change. It's an awareness thing. It's just noticing. Noticing when you're spending to belong versus spending because something genuinely matters to you. Noticing when a purchase is solving a real problem versus soothing a real anxiety. Your brain will try to tell you they're the same thing. They're not. The second shift is what some people call paying yourself first. But the reason it works isn't discipline. It's about removing the decision entirely. Automate savings before you see the money. Because if the money hits your checking account, your brain has already claimed it. But if it disappears into savings before you even open the app, future you stops being a stranger. And the third, and I think this is the biggest one, is getting honest about what your spending is actually saying. Not judging it, just reading it like a message. Because once you can see the identity and emotion underneath the transaction, you get your power back. You can choose. And that choice is the whole thing. Now, when I check my banking app, and yeah, I still check it more than I'd like to admit, I try to notice what I'm actually looking for. Sometimes it's practical, but sometimes I'm looking for reassurance. Evidence that I'm going to be okay. And that's not a money problem. That's a me problem. And money was never going to fix it anyway. The salary trap isn't really about your salary. It's about the story your brain tells about what more money would mean. Security, freedom, proof that you made it. And until you examine that story, no raise in the world is going to be enough. I'm genuinely curious if you recognize any of this in yourself. Which of these three patterns feels most familiar? Because I think that's where the real work is, not in the spreadsheet, but in the story. And the fact that you're even asking the question puts you ahead of where most people are. That's not nothing.